Hi, Laura J. here today with Richard Enos, who is going to be introducing a topic I'm curious to help the world understand and open the conversation so as to demystify something that many would be fearful of, which actually is the character of Lucifer. And so I wanted to bring Richard on today to be able to have that conversation because of your background and getting to know you through the Unity meditation affirmation mastermind group that we're part of on Monday mornings now. And so, Richard, it's great to be with you today. How are you today?
I'm doing great, and it's great to be with you as well, Laura.
Thank you. Would you start out today by just giving people an introduction to you and your own backstory to help people understand why you're qualified to be having this conversation today?
Okay, just briefly, I have a master's degree in existential philosophy, so I've always been interested in philosophy. I studied Western history and a liberal arts education, so I learned a lot about Western thought. And then I was attracted to Eastern thought, and I went over to Korea and lived there for a few years, and I also visited in India, and I studied Buddhism, Taoism, which is, the symbol of, this is the Tao and the symbol of Tao coaching, which I represent, Hinduism as well. And I was anxious to sort of integrate the Eastern traditions and the Western traditions and see, well, is one better than the other? And eventually I came to the idea that actually you need to bring the two systems together for a higher synthesis to arrive at the truth at this point. So I've been continually in a process of studying and learning about these things. I worked for Collective Evolution in 2018, from 2018 to 2020 as a journalist, and started looking into different things, spirituality, politics, the self, the world, things like that. And that's kind of continued on my website, Tao Coaching, where my articles are about the world, what's going on in the world, but also what's going on in the self, and how what's going on in the world is a projection of self. And so if we want to change the world, then we have to look inside first and then take it from there. So that's what I've been up to.
Fantastic. And then over your shoulder, you've actually got the book cover, the picture there. So if you want to describe that for people who might be interested.
Okay, if you can see it beyond the glare, this is an island here. And my book is called Parables for the New Conversation. And it really, each chapter is a parable that describes this community that lives on this island that in a sense has evolved to the point where each person is being seen as equal, and each person is helping each other learn more because each person brings a unique perspective. So each person's perspective is respected in this society. And in one parable, this person's a teacher, this person's the student. In the next parable, this person might be the student and this person is the teacher, because we can all learn things from each other. Now, the reason I call it the New Conversation is because I did training as a life coach. And in that training, which was probably the best training I ever got, and one of the reasons being that it was all women that were running it, okay? And I was deeply impressed by the knowledge and the approach, which was a co-creative approach. And so as a life coach, you come into the session not with any preconceived notions, but you come in saying, I'm coming here and maybe that person will learn something from me and I will learn something from them. And the interaction together, we're growing, okay? So it's not like a top-down, I'm the teacher, you're the student situation. So that's what I call the New Conversation. And I've seen it rising in our society where people are more understanding, they have more discernment, they don't see themselves as one side or the other. They see that we can create all this together and no one person has the answer.
Absolutely. And that's really what our Monday meetings are about as well, to come together and create a space where we can really build one another up and have a space where we can learn from one another and also get what we need to fill our cup to be able to be the leaders in this world that needs our light so much, which is part of the reason for the conversation about Lucifer today, to really unpack that character so that people can understand rather than fear the unknown. So I want to turn the conversation to that now, if you would be willing to introduce who you believe Lucifer to be, and then what brought you to that conclusion, and wherever else the conversation goes from here, Richard.
Okay, sure. And feel free to jump in anytime. First, I'll say that some of the information that I've gotten about Lucifer was part of an anonymous person called Hidden Hand. Okay, he called himself Hidden Hand, and he went onto a forum on the internet, and he introduced himself as a member of a generational bloodline family. And he said, occasionally we are tasked with bringing the truth about the world to the public. And so he got involved in a question and answer with the participants on the forum. And that probably week to 10 days of conversations going back and forth, questions and him answering them, formed the basis for a 7-part article series that I wrote called Lucifer and the Ruling Class. So trying to connect for people, who is Lucifer and who's running the planet and what's the connection there. Okay, so I'll start off trying to explain who Lucifer is in very broad terms. According to this insider, Lucifer is a group soul that exists in the 6th density. Okay, so when I say 6th density, if you want to look at where we are in the material world here as being in 3rd density, but in the process of evolving to 4th density and soon after to 5th density. And these densities are, you can consider them sort of energetic universes. And it's almost like at the same time, here we are in the 3rd density, and there's a 4th density that overlaps at a different energetic level, 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th. When you get to the 9th, that is total unity with the one creator. Down here in the 3rd density is probably the greatest feeling of separation from the one that you could have. Okay, and then as you move up, you move closer to the creator, and you become more wise, you become more evolved, and that's what allows you to ascend to the next level. So what was happening on planet Earth a long time ago, if we go back to the Garden of Eden, was that everything was perfect. Okay, this world was a paradise, and evolution wasn't happening. The people were not evolving. They were remaining as children of God, and they obeyed God. Well, there was nothing else to do but tend to the garden, really, and live in bliss and happiness. So that was all fine and good, and their God was Yahweh. Now, Yahweh, who was God from the Old Testament, I want to distinguish as not the one God, okay, but simply as the creator of the planet Earth and the human species. So let's keep that in simple terms. Yahweh is the creator, is the logos, as they say. And this is also according to Hidden Hand's testimony. So he explains this, and he explains how Lucifer came to the garden. So Yahweh, because he gets angry, he gets jealous, and so on and so forth. I think intuitively it makes sense to say he's not the one God who is everything, who is the Tao, as I like to call the one is the Tao, because they say the Tao that you can speak about is not the Tao. The everything is everything. You can't talk about it. You can't say anything about it because there's nothing particular about it. It's everything. So there's that Tao, the one creator God, which all beings know exist. And ultimately, in the ninth density, everything comes back into the one. Okay, so back on planet Earth, we have the Garden of Eden. We have people tending to gardens, and things are going nicely in cycles, the seasons and all that, but there's no evolution. So what happened is there's a council that oversees the evolution of planets in our galaxy, let's say. And this council came to Yahweh and said, look, it looks like you need a little bit of help. You're not going anywhere. And as humans evolve, Yahweh evolves. And Yahweh becomes, he lets go eventually of his anger and his jealousies and all that. That's his path. And the planet Earth as a whole also evolves. So all this isn't happening. And the reason it isn't happening is because there's no free will on the planet. So without free will, individual people can't see the consequences of their actions and can't then make a new choice. They don't generate karma. So all these things that generate growth were not there. So the council tells Yahweh, listen, we've got this very highly evolved group soul called Lucifer in the sixth density, and they volunteered to come down here and help provide a context for the human beings on your planet to grow. And Yahweh was like, I don't know, okay, try it, but and he explained, and Lucifer will come down and provide a negative choice for people. You're providing the positive choice, do good, love, and so forth, but they need to be able to choose that between that and the negative selfish choice, and then see the consequences of their actions. So he said, okay, but I don't think it'll work, but try it anyways. And so then the council said, okay, in your garden, create one tree called the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. Okay. And for the first time, tell the human beings they're not allowed to eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. This is the first time they were not allowed to do something. Tell them they can do anything else, but tempt them with this tree of the knowledge of good and evil, which has the promise of knowledge. He said, I'll try it, but they'll never do it. So he puts the tree of the knowledge of good and evil in, and Lucifer comes in, of course, as we know, as the snake, and speaks to the human beings and tells them, hey, listen, if you eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, you will gain the knowledge that will eventually allow you to become gods and equal with Yahweh. And we know the story. They decided, okay, we'll take a bite and we'll see. And Yahweh was very upset that he'd been disobeyed, and the whole pattern of duality started. He punished Lucifer as much as he could. He punished the human beings, and he was very upset. And this duality in the planet was created. So the choice between good and evil was created. The eating the tree of the knowledge of good and evil suddenly awakened the human beings to what was really going on, to the duality, and it awakened their ability to choose to disobey God. So that was created right there. Okay. So then what happened was because of Yahweh's reaction, the Lucifer soul group was empowered with the ability to rule the planet. If Yahweh had cooperated with them completely, maybe this wouldn't have had to happen, but the council allowed the Lucifer soul group to rule the planet. So to come down, incarnate as beings individually, and create a structure where they were ruling. And they would be providing the possibility of evil. They would be providing a structure where people who wanted to choose the service to self over service to others, they had somewhere that they could go. And so began this family of beings. Are you with me so far?
Is this the fallen angels that fell with Lucifer?
Okay, so it could very well be as described in the Bible, the fallen angels, okay, came to earth, and the Nephilim, who intermarried with, like they took human women as wives and they intermarried. This all connects because Lucifer, there's a Luciferian bloodline that was created when they came down. And then out of that Luciferian bloodline, which is, let's call it what it is, an extraterrestrial bloodline that came from the sixth density. They're not human beings, okay? They're a different being. Then in the process of intermarrying and copulating, there emerged the 13 bloodlines, which is to say the one extraterrestrial bloodline and the 12 human bloodlines. So these are the 13 bloodlines that rule the planet. And there's a mechanism by which they rule, and that is they rule through deception. Because the choice to be part of this bloodline, let's say if a human soul decided that they want to incarnate as one in the human bloodline, they wanted to have power in the world, they wanted to have wealth, they wanted to experience that, and in exchange for that, they had to be part of this family that was using deception and evil and corruption and enslavement of the planet in order to really create that context where human beings could really sort of be forced into making choices between good and evil. So that's kind of what happened. The 13 bloodlines were created, and they had vast knowledge. They had extraterrestrial knowledge from the top, from the Lucifer, the real bloodline, had the knowledge of how the planet worked and how you could control people, manipulate people, brainwash people, okay, how you could deceive people. This knowledge was passed down to the human bloodlines. And they developed a system, sort of a family system, which is very, very strict. So when you're born into these bloodline families, what happens is you go through training as a child to the point where you lose empathy for others. So this could involve torture, rape, mind control, okay? It could involve all these things. But according to Hidden Hand, he said the Lucifer group at the top didn't need those things because the individuals born into their main family understood that they were all there for a certain purpose, which was to provide a service to humanity so that humanity could grow. So that knowledge was there. But when you got to the human bloodlines didn't really have that knowledge. All they knew is that if they followed what was being told by the Luciferian bloodline to them to follow, to structure, to create their families in a certain way, to have meetings, to use these mind control techniques and so forth, then they were promised that they would eventually rule the planet and that they would have unimaginable wealth and power. Okay, so this would be their motivation for doing what they're doing. So in those families, then, the whole idea was you have to follow certain protocols of raising your children. So when a children is brought up with trauma, with a certain type of trauma, certain type of mind control, this sense that they're nothing, okay, low self-esteem, and they are being abused by someone older, could be your parents, could be someone else, then you create a connection to the abuser that is your only link to life, is to be obedient to the abuser. And now that abuser is being obedient to their abuser, and this is the chain of command, or the connection that creates this pyramid that is the bloodline families. So when people say, well, if these bloodline families were ruling and all this torture and was going on and so forth, we'd know about it, people would come out, they'd talk. Well, I've come to understand how powerful the brainwashing and the protocols are to control the minds of people. And once if you start when they're a child, and once you break them down and force them to simply link to the family and have the only thing in your mind is devotion to the family, because you don't have a connection to God, you don't have a connection to other people, you don't have a connection to your parents. And so you go out in the world to dominate people. You go in the world to be a leader. You go in the world to be successful. You go in the world to make money. Okay, all these things are encouraged, and love is not encouraged. And in fact, the people that go through this process, they become psychopathic. So they have no empathy and they have no connection to love. And not everybody survives this rigorous training. There's a group of there's a type of people that are very highly functioning psychopaths. And those are the people that are leading in the world, the world leaders. Okay, the leaders of the global organizations and the countries in the key positions. So if you consider that this group that has been around since the beginning of time has always been there and has been able to accumulate vast, immeasurable wealth and power and influence, then they would be able to take their people and place them in exactly the positions of power that they needed them to. So then if, you can go back in history and you can say, they were doing things this way at that time. Now, when every country supposedly thinks they're a democracy, it's a question of how much are they influencing the elections? How much are they influencing getting their person into power? Okay, so their person gets into power, and then their person is simply completely devoted to the agenda. And they are completely, there's nothing else in their mind. So when you say to yourself, for example, oh, Justin Trudeau, what an idiot. How could he do this? He's not an idiot. He's just a puppet for this group. And he's part of that group. And he doesn't have the ability not to follow what he's being told. And so if you look at the politicians and the powerful people, like you look in the world and you want to trust these powerful people who have been successful and who seem charismatic and all that, when you realize they're really psychopaths. Okay, not to say they're psychopaths, which means that their empathy is gone. They're not connected to humanity. They don't care about whether someone lives or dies. Then you can start to understand, oh, maybe there is a eugenics agenda in the world. Maybe, everything that's happening in the world is happening because they are trying to depopulate. And they're trying to depopulate. We can't believe it because we consider that horrible. But if you're a psychopath, you don't have any bad feeling about it. So they need, this group needs leaders who are willing to go to war, needs leaders who are willing to not care about how many people die, to enact this agenda. So now when we go back to what is the overall purpose of this from up top, it is again to create a context in the world so that people like you and me can rise up and make a very brave choice from our inner knowing about what's right and wrong and make the right choice. If we had a benevolent dictator that, just like Yahweh was in the Garden of Eden, essentially a benevolent dictator, it was paradise, but it's almost like the human beings couldn't experience the paradise as paradise because they only knew paradise. So it's just like, wake up, what are you going to do? Oh, I'm going to rake the radishes. What about you? I'm going to clip the leaves here. All right, Instead, what Lucifer has produced and created here is a context for us to have very high experiences of self-realization and personal evolution through the struggle between the temptation of service to self, which is very strong, and it's become stronger in our society. It's become promoted. So that temptation, and the inner urge to be of service to others. And it's made it so that we really have to work hard to maintain this. We really have to generate will, and we have to generate our own internal motivation. And these are the qualities that push us to ascend to a higher density. And so that's what this whole mechanism is about. Make sense?
It does make sense. And so then I would be curious to hear what the distinction between Luciferianism and Satanism is, if you're able to offer that, because I feel like what I've heard is about the children and the blood sacrifice being the difference, that Luciferians are not into that and that Satanists are. But I don't know whether if that's accurate or not.
People, yeah, it gets complicated, and I don't profess to be an expert on that, but I'll opine. I'll give my opinion. Luciferianism is service to self, right? Like Aleister Crowley said, "Do as thou wilt," which is to say, there is no morality. There is just self-interest as the motivator. And if you're a Luciferian, you do your own thing by your own, guide and principles. There's no restricting in Luciferianism what you can do, and that includes blood sacrifice and torture. But if you go back to the Lucifer group at the top, the extraterrestrials, they were not engaging in that. But they don't, it's of no consequence what the human bloodlines would eventually engage in. And the human bloodlines do engage in pedophilia, torture, and sacrifice, drinking of blood, which has adrenochrome. Okay, so then you might say, well, they're involved in a satanic practice or some other type of practice. Well, in my mind, the simple way of seeing it is you're either service to self or service to others. You're either doing good or evil. So Luciferianism and Satanism and any other Druidism and um, any other sort of spiritual tradition that has you gain energy by sucking it from others, because you have a thirst for that energy because you don't have it yourself. You're not connected to the life force, to God.
Mm-hmm.
Although you are ultimately, but you're a psychopath. You can't feel it. You necessarily develop a dependency on the energy that's coming from the outside.
Vampirism.
And what's that?
Vampirism.
Yeah, exactly. That's your life force. And it's like some addictions. You need more of a hit the next time. It's not just the same amount. You need more. It's got to be more extreme. It's got to be more severe. So when you get into that mindset, when you start off, like what happens, and I'll just introduce this idea. You have the bloodlines, right? And that's the family. Now, the family, 13 bloodlines, called the pure bloodlines, has been subdivided into these smaller streams, like, rivers, the source, the rivers, the streams. Okay, there's a lot of different streams of groups who become, and some people who are not connected with the bloodline families and that family, they can sort of at a lower level, they can enter in and be part of the chain, be part of the pyramidal power structure. So let's say, you're down here, and then this group, this coven says, look at these people here. Let's get them to work for us, and let's get them inculcated in our particular version of service to self, which is our particular version of vampirism, right? And so these people, they bring people in slowly into the circle, and they introduce them to a certain experience. I think about, which I've written about, the Bohemian Grove experience, where you bring leaders from all over the world to have like a weekend with the boys sort of thing. And there is the cremation of care ceremony there. So you bring them to a ceremony like that. The cremation of care ceremony is the burning of a child, an effigy of a child, or perhaps a real child, we don't know. And in the process, it's a sort of it's a spiritual releasing of all your cares through sacrifice. Now there is a lot of information out there that this works. In other words, people who go over to the dark side and participate in rituals lose their care. They don't care anymore. But in a sense, like at first they portray it like all your worries, all your fears, you can get rid of them, which is seen as a good thing. But what happens is, along with your worries and your fears, you lose completely your care of humanity, like utterly. You don't care about anything anymore, except where's your next fix going to come from. So then they observe people there, and they see, oh, this person seems to be getting pretty high on this. Let's get them into a situation tomorrow where it's a little more extreme, and let's see if they choose to participate, they choose to dive in. And so in that way, people get lured into the process, and then once they're sort of connected with the need to take energy from others, then they're kind of hooked like an addict. There's a testimony on the internet by Ronald Bernard. He's a Dutch banker, and he talks about the process that he went through And so he was going to these satanic church meetings, and people were naked and having orgies and all, and drinking and all that sort of thing. And he thought it was very amusing. And very slowly, things started to elevate until the time came when he was told that he was invited off to a different country to sacrifice a child. And at that moment, his conscience, he still had some conscience. I mean, he was a top banker. He thought very highly of himself. He was egocentric, and he was in that selfish mindset, service to self, and become as wealthy as possible. But at this particular moment, he was able to say, "Oh, I can't do this," and then he couldn't even do his job anymore, and he had to get out of it. And he says the only reason that probably that he's not dead is because he hasn't named anybody's names. But he does go around and talk about his experiences and really encourage people to choose the light, and really make people realize there's this darkness there. It's right here. It's real. And we can't just sit on the fence. We have to make a choice, and we have to be part of this, So he's came from a position where he could talk about that. Then there's someone named Svali, who was a trainer in the family, and she was able to come out and write all about the training, from an early age, the torture, the brainwashing, and all that sort of thing. So she was one of those rare people that was able to do that. And, we lost touch with her. In other words, she might have been found and killed. She was writing about, 15, 20 years ago. So there are a few people that come out, but if you can understand that the system is a tried and true mind control system, where not only can they get people to devote themselves completely, and they're not even thinking on their own, but they are functioning. Like, they are able to function in the world as leaders, but they're very highly supported by their friends in the family who are also high up. So if you look at any government, Canadian government, US government, there's these big factions that are part of the family that have been put into positions of power. And then when it comes to, getting a promotion to this position, well, they use all their influence and power to, they'll bribe people, they'll threaten people, they'll get blackmail on people. All of these sort of tactics are used in the name of power and eventually ruling the planet, being rulers. And this is the agenda that we see playing out in front of us right now. So, yeah.
I was just going to say, with all of that information, for anybody that's listening thinking, oh my God, what are we going to do? What would you say is the way that we triumph?
Well, we have the power. And, the human beings that are connected to Source are the majority, are the vast majority, the 99%, the 99.5% or whatever, connected to Source, know intuitively the truth. But just like, we talked about evolving to the next level, people are not using this knowledge and embodying it fully and living fully in accordance with what they know to be right. If that happened, then the light would just wash over the planet and the darkness would have no ability to survive, because the darkness only survives in hiding. The darkness survives behind deception. So my particular mission, I guess, is truth, the light of truth. What is the truth? Bringing the truth forward, being humble, being sincere. This is what I know. This is what I found, okay, in my journalism. And hoping to inspire people to take the next step in their own mind and go from being a little bit lazy and letting our leaders dictate policy to us, to seeing, you know what, I'm not going to follow that because that's wrong. And this is the nature of the conversations we're having with this COVID pandemic right now, is that people who have been on the fence, or people who have been lazy, people who have given their power away to authority, are being challenged because what authority is saying and what they know in their heart is so different. They got to make a choice because the cognitive dissonance is killing them. So eventually that helps them to make that choice. So for any individual, in the context of, what I'm talking about, the darkness in the world, the darkness is there, but it's by invitation, and you have to accept the invitation to be part of it. So you don't have to worry necessarily about being directly impacted by this powerful group, because obviously, as I explained at the top, the agenda of Lucifer is to awaken humanity to a higher level of evolution. That's their agenda. So if someone is in the process of doing that, okay, the dark cannot interfere. And we have a global council above that that's going to make sure that that interference doesn't happen. So it's the lower level people in the bloodlines that right now are causing all the havoc and doing these crazy things. But this whole system is breaking down, naturally breaking down, because its purpose was human awakening. So as humanity awakens, the agenda is fulfilled, and there's no longer a need to bring all this darkness into the world. So it works perfectly. We don't have to worry about Lucifer. We don't have to worry about Satan. We just have to ask ourselves, am I evolving myself in satanic practice or Luciferian practice? Am I being in service to myself? Am I being selfish? Am I being selfish? Then I'm following. Am I gaining at the expense of others? Then I'm practicing Luciferianism. I'm practicing Satanism. Okay. That is the one thing that this moment in time is asking of people is, okay, you've been on the fence. Humanity has been on the fence for, thousands of years, you could say, since, you go back to the Bible, and the Bible's, you read the Bible, you read the Old Testament, the same struggle is going on. People deciding, like Daniel, deciding he believes in God and he believes in doing good. And so they throw him into the cage of lions, and the lions don't eat him because he's good. And then people that are just in service to self and are greedy and selfish and fearful and all that, the lions eat them up right away. So this is the thing that's been talked about the whole time. This particular moment in time is a great moment to be alive, because it's the moment where we're awakening and our consciousness has evolved to a level of complexity where we can actually make a real choice for good, not because we're worried that God's going to punish us if we do bad. We're making a positive choice because we love one another. And we know that our positive choice, my positive choice, affects everybody. And as I make that positive choice, people all come back with that positive choice. And this is love, right? This is like, we all end up sharing love. As you said on our Monday Zoom meeting, that's what we do. And that's what we're doing. And we get energized from that. And that's the sort of thing that just we need spreading throughout the world, throughout the 99% of people who are connected to Source.
I've been having a lot of conversations with the man who's been helping me with the summons that I dealt with through a notice. And I bring this up because he's been studying the will for 20 years and has been hugely insightful, as has this conversation. So if you're watching, we'd love to know your perspective on what's been shared today. So please do leave a comment, like the message, and share it with a friend that may be open to understanding truth from a way that can empower because of the conversation that it will begin. So that's one thing that I wanted to mention. And then the other piece of this is actually the conversation largely focuses in on selfishness. And the conversation that I've been having with my friend is about selflessness and how selflessness ties to selfishness as well. Because I feel like right now, part of the deceptive agenda is to make it about the greater good and to jeopardize and risk your own safety and health for the sake of others, because that is what you're supposed to do, which is very deceptive, which evil is live backwards. So I wonder if you have a perspective on selflessness as to how it relates to selfishness and Luciferianism and Satanism.
Yeah, well, it, when you say selflessness in that way, in that particular way, it's like you're abandoning or giving up yourself and your power, which is not love. It is it's based in fear. And so this, we've seen this collectivist mindset being pushed in society, socialism, and the idea that you should do it for the good of the group. And so the group becomes a bully who's telling people who are outside of the group, they're kind of influencing them and actually trying to make it seem like they're being loving by doing what the group is telling them to do. But it's completely not that. Love is standing in your truth and not being moved at all. You know what your truth is. So, yes, of course, do something good for the group if you believe it's good for the group. But don't just follow the group who are bullying you into following them. I mean, the whole, the talk about around racism and a lot of these other social justice issues are like that. You're actually being bullied to follow a certain agenda, which has nothing to do with self-realization. So they can call it selflessness. Selflessness, if that's what you mean by selflessness, then we can see how that's not love. But the word selflessness can also be used as equating with love, in the sense that you care. It's not that you're giving up something, you're giving up your ego, you're giving up your selfishness in being selfless. So in that sort of definition of it, that equates with love, selflessness. But the definition, giving up your power, giving up your sort of your responsibility to do the right thing, to do the thing that inside you believe, then it is a negative, and it's a tool of manipulation. That it's preying on people who haven't developed that sense of self-responsibility yet to, as an example, go get a vaccine because, and justify it by saying, I'm being unselfish by going to get a vaccine and protecting others. But this is someone who's saying that without even having thought about if that's true, or having done the research to see if that's a valid point they're making. They're just following the group of people who are pushing that idea, right? As you said.
Well, and further to that, not just because that word in and of itself can get videos banned, which makes it dangerous and taboo to even mention. what is currently being purported as that is not actually. It's just been clumped under that category, which is actually gene therapy. And so to really understand that the way that you familiarize people with something is to put it under the category people are already familiar with. And then that becomes the way that it is accepted as truth when it is the light in reverse. And so, with this conversation, actually, tomorrow at 5 o'clock, I'm hosting a call for parents and youth to be able to advocate for themselves to not receive anything into their bodies that is not of their greatest and highest good, nor the greatest and highest good of the collective. Though, from the Sustainability Act's perspective, which is designed to save Earth's resources for the few at the expense of the many, such as what this conversation has been about, we really have to have a conversation about how to advocate for ourselves when it means that we are the minority standing against, but not actually the majority, saying, please, I'm doing this not just for myself. I'm doing this for you who are not thinking and who are being forced into this. Because yesterday I was on a call. I'm in a quest group learning about the hero's journey from the teachings of the ascended masters, and it's tied into the sacred sojourn of the soul that I've been working on in my book for the last 4 years. And so last night I happened to, for whatever reason, I don't normally self-promote, and I wasn't doing it for that purpose, but I did mention that this call was happening on Thursday night if anyone was interested. And I got a message from somebody that was on that call saying, oh, I think this is you, and I was on that call, and thank you for mentioning that, because I've got friends and family that I love that are telling me it's selfish for me not to take in this substance that everybody else is doing, and I haven't really met anybody else that is standing against it or talking about it, and so I've just really felt crazy. And so it's fascinating to me that I just followed my intuition and mentioned it, and then I had somebody go out of their way in order to find me, in order to say, can I get on this call? So Wednesday, May 26th is when this is being recorded, and Thursday, May 27th at 5 p.m. is when that call for empowering youth and parents to self-advocate and call for personal responsibility and liability is what the intention for tomorrow's call will be. And the reason I share this with the heart that I do is because it very much ties into everything that we've been talking about today. And I very much appreciate your perspective and the way that you have shared it, because I feel like you've done it in a way that is not scary. And what I have come to believe in all of my work, and there were so many points when I could have went down rabbit holes that you opened up, and I didn't want to interrupt your flow because that would have been taking over and bringing in my agenda, which I didn't want to knock you off course, because we can always have another follow-up conversation, and I believe that would be very useful. And to be able to bring in others as well who maybe watch this video and would like to participate in a conversation, so that we can actually take what was scared and bring it back to being sacred by changing where the creativity is placed within that dynamic. And that really is how I believe we take our power back. So I very much appreciate your perspective today and your willingness to stand for truth and to be willing to highlight where truth is masquerading as truth, or where falsity is masquerading as truth. And the false light of Lucifer is really what is presenting itself as the truth of source. So any final comments or contributions for today for anybody that may have listened to all of this and just had their mind blown and not quite sure where to go from here?
Well, I was just thinking about what you said about the person who got in touch with you and who had not heard anybody advocating for that. I think if people are wondering, what do I do? You kind of answered it, and I'll reiterate it. Be still and discover inside what you're motivated to do in this process. There's so many different ways, but imagine if by, writing, and I'm going to be writing an open letter and um, as my next article. And imagine writing an article, or imagine, doing an interview, or imagine talking to someone, or holding a sign up, or any of those things where you're doing the thing that came to your mind as the thing to do, and then you just go ahead and do it. Then you will find that person who needed you to be there at that time, at that moment, or who needed you to write that, or needed you to say that, to say, you know what, I was looking for someone like you to get me a little more confidence to stand up for myself, a little more confidence to believe in what I thought. And when you have that influence on people, I mean, there's nothing more that needs to be said. That's what it's all about. And that's what each of us love about this process is sharing the light, and have someone take it and say, yeah, I got it, and I'm going to pass it on, and we're going to expand this whole thing.
Absolutely. Brilliant. Grateful for your time today and your insights and contributions, Richard. Richard and I are co-hosting the Monday Leaders Unity meetings at 10:30 Eastern Standard Time. So if you're interested, please do reach out to Richard. I'll have his email underneath of here, and he can get you the details for that meeting. And we'll very much look forward to coming together and standing in our power and being the leaders of ourselves first and foremost, so that together we can be the change we seek in this world.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Laura.
My absolute pleasure. Have a great day. Thanks, guys.